Okay. Live. Gonna give it a couple of seconds. I know I was supposed to do this at 9 o'clock. Some people may be looking at the State of the Union. And I'm gonna try to catch that as well. I just really don't feel like hearing Biden talk, to be honest with you. It's not even a priority of mine to just hear what he has to say. It's almost like it's catch it on a replay. It's just not a priority of mine. So if you're looking at the State of the Union, I think it's supposed to be going on right now. That's cool. I'm just going to keep this going. And if you catch this conversation on the replay, you are more than welcome. So the first thing that I am going to talk about is our dear Vice President, Kamala Harris. And she was recently asked on a radio interview to explain the nuts and bolts of the Ukraine situation. And obviously, she is explaining this to a Black audience. And she provides, the problem with these handpicked politicians is that the media props them up to this virtuous level, right? But then when we see them, when we have to actually see them show up as the person, as the individual that's, driving the processes or whatever, then you just kind of see this screwball. So with Kamala Harris, I think that she has obviously elevated herself in her careers for a variety of different reasons, but I just don't see how. I really just don't see how. And whatever. We know that, if anything, Klaus Schwab, kind of let the cat out of the bag, that many of our global politicians are handpicked. And these individuals are handpicked for a variety of different reasons. They may appeal to these individuals' insecurities, their thirst for power and relevancy, whatever. A lot of our politicians are handpicked. But she provides this explanation of what the Ukraine issue is essentially about. And I just want to play this clip, and I want to just kind of cite fair usage here. This is just for dialogue and educational purposes. But, I want you guys to hear Kamala Harris explain to Black people what's happening in Ukraine. And hopefully they don't scrub it, because she sounded so sad. I mean, Kamala Harris, okay, here it is. So she is doing an interview with the Morning Hustle, which is, it's a hip hop syndicate radio station, right? And she is asked, and I'm just going to let you guys hear the clip. And again, I am just going on fair usage. And so I just want everybody to know I don't have any rights to this clip at all. I am just making a point by playing this clip. And this is actually from Sky News Australia. They're relatively conservative, so hopefully they would not have an issue with this. So I don't pay for YouTube, so we're going to have to just let this commercial run real quick so that we can do this. But this is what they are throwing to Black people, right? So she's asked to explain Ukraine.
What's going on right now?
Here we go.
Ukraine. Break it down in layman's terms for people who don't understand what's going on and how can this directly affect the people of the United States.
This is how...
Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically that's wrong.
So you guys heard that very elementary explanation as to what is happening to Ukraine. right? That is not the nuts and bolts of what's happening in Ukraine right now. Kamala Harris was asked specifically, what is going on in Ukraine? Tell us the nuts and bolts. And she basically goes into this childlike explanation of geography. Ukraine is, and it's just like, come on, Kamala, come on. I mean, you just cannot keep looking this awful and like you don't know what you're talking about and like you can't answer a question organically, right? Again, I made a post earlier about, and I've been following this Ukraine thing. You know, I have Ukrainian friends. I dated a guy who was from Kiev. I'm gonna say Kiev, not Kiev. I've been hearing a lot. It's Kiev. I dated a guy from Kiev, and you know, and it's interesting because even this guy from Kiev, he will say that he's right. And I think that is kind of, there's a lot of layers to this conflict between Russia and Ukraine that I feel like the Western media is not really focusing on. And I think, hey, what's up, Richard? I'm talking about, first of all, I just got done talking about Kamala Harris's big old fail, explaining the Ukrainian nuts and bolts situation, the Ukraine-Russia situation to the black radio station. And she just basically gave this childlike, ignorant, for dummies, super dummies version to this radio station that made no sense to the question that was asked of her. And so, you know, and that's just to say she's not a diplomatic individual. I don't know how she ended up being the vice president of the United States. But again, when you have individuals who are being handpicked to meet certain agendas, they are puppets. And that's what I look like. I look at people like Kamala Harris like, but in explaining the Ukraine situation to black people, I feel like she missed an opportunity to really be, you know, give them the nuts and bolts, but really be real with people about what's going on. It's if I were Kamala Harris and I was asked that question, I would say it's a very complicated situation, which it is a very complicated situation because you have, you know, a lot of internal feelings about how the region should be positioned, and then you have a lot of external feelings about how the Ukrainian region should be positioned, right? And it's these external influences really that is creating the scenario, in my opinion, that we see today. And you know, I'm American. You know, I'm an American, but I'm an individual that no matter, I'm for what's right. I'm for what's I'm for what's right. And even if my side is not right, I'm not about to stand by my side if they're not right. If there's the other side is not right, I'm not going to agree with them. We live in this hate cultured society, this polarized type world where individuals feel like they have to take a side. You have to be a Democrat or you have to be a Republican. You have to be right or you have to be, or and it's like, you know what? How about the center? Because the center is a place to be. And sometimes the center can allow you to be able to entertain a broad array of arguments because you are not committed to a side, you know? And so I have learned in the last 2 years of just dealing with this global chaos, these global transition, and all these global agendas. I have learned that it is not valuable to have a side in anything in respects to the affairs of men on this earth. It's just not valuable. It is not valuable to laud or praise individuals because you just don't know what that person has done that you are not aware of. We are not aware of what happened in Odessa, right? That wasn't national news, right? That wasn't mainstream media in America force feeding what was happening in Ukraine in 2014. They weren't force feeding that down our throats. So we were unaware that the Western Ukrainians were causing much atrocities on Russian national who had a sovereign allegiance to Russia because of their history, right? And when you look at the languages, they're very similar, right? So when you have an individual like Vladimir Zelensky, and this is where Volodymyr, I'm sorry, not Vladimir, Volodymyr Zelensky, you know, when he came into power, right? And a lot of people need to understand this because they're thinking, oh, Putin is just being power hungry and he expand his territory. And it's like, who knows what Putin is really doing? But I can honestly say that Putin seems like he is trying to his borders. And with Ukraine pushing to be a NATO nation or whatnot, I'm pretty sure Vladimir Putin is sitting there saying, okay, they're fucking with me. They are fucking with me because they are trying to expand themselves into my backyard. And it's not like NATO has not had these conversations with Russia. It's not like Russia has not expressed these concerns. But it's like, you know, it's interesting to me that, you know, people claim to be diplomatic, but they can't really look at this diplomatically. And maybe NATO has been looking at this diplomatically because Ukraine is not a NATO country and they've been pretty much trying to be a NATO country, but they haven't become a NATO country. And I think NATO is smart enough to understand that Russia is a volatile nation. They're in bed with China. They're in bed with Iran. And if you look at, you know, these resolutions to condemn Russia and what Russia is doing right now, Saudi Arabia did not do it. China did not do it. And another thing I learned about China is China did not use mRNA vaccine on their people and Russia. And they use vaccines that were close to the vaccines that people were used to taking, which is just a dead pathogen, a dead version of the pathogen, right? So they weren't even using mRNA technology. And I think people need to know that as well. Why wasn't China and Russia using mRNA technology? Why were they using old school vaccine techniques on their people? You know, this is a very valid question. But getting back, I think NATO kind of drug their asses on Ukraine joining NATO because they knew that this would be a scenario. And that is why I'm not really, it's hard to look at NATO so much right now and not, a lot of people's like, don't look at Volodymyr Zelensky. He's the victim. He's the hero. And it's like, I'm not so sure about that. You know, I think it's valiant that he is standing with his people. He is fighting with his people. And I think that real leaders do that, right? Real leaders of at least the old, they put on their suit of armor and they fought alongside their people, especially during times of invasions, right? Maybe the Western countries are different because we like to, shelter our president away from danger. Our presidents never go into the trenches to deal with danger. So, but I think that what he is doing right now is valiant. He's fighting for his people because obviously ain't nobody else coming like to Ukraine's aid. Like NATO, they're aligning all their forces around the NATO countries. I mean, and I think that's a point to think about. You hear all this big point of talk about what NATO is doing right now. NATO is protecting their NATO allied countries, which does not include Ukraine. They add Ukraine recently in the last couple of days as a NATO country, and now they can go to war with Russia. Can anybody know that? Because Ukraine is not a NATO country. Right. And I personally believe, and I got a lot of backlash because I posted this today. And a lot of people felt or I got messages like I was maybe being inconsiderate. But my whole thing is I like to just ask questions like, okay, you're force feeding this reality down my throat, which the mainstream media has been doing to people for years. I got questions, So I posted this today. I was like, look, I see what's happening in Ukraine. I think it's all Russia is making a terrible mistake. Making this move, it definitely interrupts global peace. it creates an element of not knowing what Russia will do next. So it's not a good look for Russia at all. But at the same damn time, I feel like there's other layers of this conversation that are missing. And I think that they would be valid because I don't think Vladimir Putin woke up 6 days ago and was like, I'm going to run on Russia. I'm going to run on Russia. No, I don't think he woke up with that. I think build up. There were conversations and diplomacy that did not happen and things went wrong. But this is why I said the elephant in the room to me, just playing devil's adversary here. I'm the newly elected president of Ukraine. I get elected and immediately start frolicking with NATO about becoming a member right away, knowing I have a shark in my backyard that has expressed concerns about my neutrality and opposition to my membership. And a lot of people make the argument, well, Ukraine is allowed to join the EU and NATO if they want to. Okay, yeah, that's true, but Ukraine needs to be smart. If I was the president of Ukraine, I wouldn't have been talking NATO as soon as I came in the door. But Zelensky did that. I am emboldened to think that I am that guy to go after that shark because I am not, but I'm not a part of NATO, but I'm a big flex like to this shark, like I possibly am, aggravating this shark to the point of moving on me. Deep down, I know I should have more organic and diplomatic relationships with the shark for the interest of peace in my region. I feel bad for the people of Ukraine. There seemed to be no logical diplomacy executed to avoid this chaos and further violation of human rights in the world. Governments play pissing matches and the people suffer the recourse. If Ukraine cared about its sovereignty, it should have been more neutral than vocal about its neutrality concerning joining NATO, because really that is what is triggering Vladimir Putin seemingly, is that Zelensky came in with that big talk, I'm joining NATO and the EU, we are Europeans and we embrace the European and everything. Basically, he was, and a lot of people don't talk about this, Zelensky was doing some level of ethnic cleansing in Ukraine of Russian-minded and allied individuals in eastern Ukraine. And a lot of people don't want to talk about the fact that Ukraine has been in a civil war. They have been fighting each other, right? They have been fighting each other. East Ukraine has been fighting West Ukraine. That has really been going on. Previous comedian Lil Sweet. I think that I really do believe that Volodymyr Zelensky was one of those Klaus Schwab picks. And see, Klaus Schwab picks the beta people that want the power and the glory, and the media can, geek them up, and they may have some kind of, attraction to them, and whatever they don't have, the media will make up for them. And so Zelensky, comedian turned politician, won the hearts of the nation, of Ukrainians. We don't know if that election was legitimate, because if it was legitimate, then I would say this: half of that country did not want a part of the agenda of Zelensky. Half of that country was not down. The eastern part, they were not down with joining the EU. They were not down with joining NATO, right? And we don't talk about that. We don't talk about what the people wanted in Ukraine. We do not talk about that. The people in Ukraine did not have a consensus at all. And we don't talk about the fact that Eastern Ukrainians were getting help from Russians because they were damn near defenseless against Western Ukrainian powers. We do not talk about that. I was actually reading, what is it? This is an article, because not Israel really hasn't had a whole lot to say about this either, because Israel doesn't really have a whole lot of positive opinions about Ukraine either, because they supported Nazis. And even on this homepage, this is from the ECIPS, warns that moving too close in supporting neo-Nazis in Ukraine, right? So Ukraine has neo-Nazis, right? They have neo-Nazis factions that support Western democratic agenda. The west side of Ukraine's democratic agenda. And Putin has said things like this. They're supporting Nazis, right? Eastern Ukrainians are saying that they're supporting Nazis. We don't talk about the Odessa massacre and how those Eastern Ukrainians, some of them 39 people, I believe, almost 40, were burned alive in these polarizing political rivalries that were happening in Ukraine. And I'm not saying that people should not care about what's happening to the Ukrainian people. I look at this as a liberation and an invasion. If Putin would have just stopped at the east, I don't think we would have had too much to worry about. But Putin went the distance to invade. And I think that, no matter, what, we don't know what the reason was. We can only make assumptions, but we have to speculate that it has to have something to do with the concerns that he has continuously voiced to NATO about their expansion, right? And we got to think about this too. Every time NATO expands into anywhere close to a volatile nation in the East, that is going to trigger these Eastern nations. It triggers them. And for the interest of global peace, why would you do that? I want America to have national security. I want every country to have a level of national security. But I just don't feel like from a NATO diplomacy standpoint that NATO did all that they could to avoid this situation. And now they're looking stupid and trying to big flex now because they didn't think that Putin was actually going to do what he's doing right now. And that's the thing. How you going to call somebody a killer and then keep underestimating them? And I think we need to be real about this. I am not a communist sympathizer, right? I'm anti-communism. That's why I'm anti-progressive Democrats in the United States right now, because they're promoting communism. They're promoting that. I don't know what sympathizing with Russia means, because I've met really good Russian people and I don't hate Russian people, right? And this is what people are being programmed to do. Hate because the media told you to hate. Hate Putin and look at what he's doing to Ukraine. Don't try to explore the why. That's not important. Just look at the fact that he's causing atrocity and genocide and this is the problem I have with the media. The media overframes. They overframe and their rhetoric becomes so ridiculous, repetitive, and almost consistent across the networks. Then it's like my red flags go up. Ain't nobody original reporting on this. Ain't nobody giving their own assessment about what's happening. Everybody's reading from the same talking points and the same playbook. And that's where I'm just like, I'm not about to hate nobody on this planet. I don't hate anybody on this planet. I don't hate anybody on this planet. I don't hate anybody on this planet. I think that is for my Lord. I think that people will get theirs in their own time. But I'm not going to bandwagon hate other people, no matter what nation they're from, because people do not want war. Governments want war. People are the casualties of wars. People are the casualties of their government's pissing matches. And I think that it's worth looking at Zelensky a little bit harder, because I don't feel like he's the hero that the mainstream media is painting him to be. And the fact that they are doing what they're doing, to get this extreme emotional appeal is, to me, it's turning people off and it's waking people up. I've listened to Zelensky's appeals. I've listened to Vladimir Putin. You can't even catch Putin's anymore. But Zelensky sounded like a dude that thought he had cards in his hands. He thought that he was for sure that because he was frolicking with all these NATO nations, that he's on the forum. Yeah, he thought that he was frolicking with all these NATO nations, that they were going to help him avoid a situation like this. I think that's what that he really thought. Like, I'm doing all these deals with all these Western nations. They're helping me with technology. They're putting biolabs in my country. And that's another thing they don't want to talk about either, why Putin may have had some concern, because I believe they had up to 8 biolabs in Ukraine. 8 biolabs. And you can kind of understand from a national security standpoint why a nation like Russia would not want biolabs in their backyard just as much as they wouldn't want NATO missiles in their backyard. But is Putin absolutely evil for going into Ukraine the way that he did? Absolutely. War is terrible. Anybody that institute war, they're evil, right? But I question, though, if this was a strategic move of Putin's, and if the claims that he laid out that were his claims, mostly that there were Eastern Ukrainians that had Russian allegiance that were being killed. I think they said around 14,000 Eastern Ukrainians have been killed by Western Ukrainians since for the past 8 years. So in the past 8 years, I believe 14,000 Eastern Ukrainians. So there's a lot of human rights violations that have happened in Ukraine that these Western, nations and media, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about those things. And that's why it's like when I look at some of this stuff, I'm just like, I'm out. I can't even think about this anymore. And I'm wondering what Biden is going to say in our State of the Union. And I'm not looking at it right now, but I'm going to look at it on a replay. But I wonder, is he going to do anything to antagonize or aggravate this situation anymore? Because one thing Zelensky did say is that the media coverage from the Western countries aggravated. They felt like that we were instigating something that really may not have happened. It could have been the rhetoric from the West is what made Putin want to just pull that trigger. I mean, when you're talking about dealing with a killer, you're talking about dealing with somebody that is supposed to be dangerous. Why would you trigger them? Like, why would you trigger them? Is my question. But my last point is, because I didn't want to make this a long live, but my last point was a point that I made yesterday. And I think, like I said, Ukraine is beyond my control as an American citizen. I'd venture to say that this situation is honestly beyond America's control, because you're dealing with, honestly, this is a battle of two. Ukraine is not even a NATO nation. So that's all the more reason. Can we be completely repulsed by the fact that Russia decided to invade Western Ukraine? Absolutely, because he should have just stopped at liberating the East, which he made the pretense that he was going to do. But he went way further. I don't even think we would have the beef that we have right now if Vladimir Putin would have just stopped at East Ukraine and kind of just waited to see what Zelensky was going to be doing in the West, in terms of his Western alliances and what they would ultimately mean. So I think he kind of moved on impatience, but I also think that he could have been possibly instigated, and that matters. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and I heard about this a couple of weeks ago, and it was just kind of some chit chatter. I caught it on a video. I didn't want to do a video about it at first, and I didn't even want to commit a video to it, but I thought it was interesting because there was some chatter about Wall Street being upset about the Moderna trials, right? And Moderna's stock started slowly falling. And then it comes out recently that DNA sequence in the coronavirus is actually, it matches a sequence that is patented by Moderna. And obviously, researchers are looking at this phenomenon. They're saying that, it's hard to find a patent sequence in a naturally formed virus. So this is reigniting that lab leak theory that, the coronavirus, COVID-19, may have been a lab leak virus. It's looking more and more likely, but also that, there may be some bigger things that we need to explore with the COVID-19 and even down to these vaccines, right? So I wanted to kind of make that point too, because the fight for vaccine mandates are not over. We still have U.S. corporations that are still shaking the livelihood of people because they want them to take these vaccines. And they're firing people, still letting people go, even though even the New Zealand court said that it was a gross violation of human rights. Our U.S. companies are still going the distance with vaccine mandates. So that's just to say that your company doesn't care about you. Your company doesn't care about you. Even, to me, no matter how much they may be invested in protecting you, they ultimately don't care about you because they don't care what you're putting in your body, and they're not even giving you a choice for you to care about what you put in your body, or at least know what you're putting in your body. So watch out for more developments on this, because I think it's very interesting. And I want to hear more about what researchers say. Is it possible that a Moderna patent sequence, DNA sequence, could be found in this coronavirus? How is that possible? Is it possible? And again, I am not an anti-vax person. I think, if there are vaccines that benefit, individuals, and their healthcare professionals say that, hey, this will work for you, this is a good solution for your healthcare regimen, do what you need to do for yourself. Do what you need to do for yourself, because vaccines are not designed to stop transmission. Right? They're not designed to stop transmission. So what your individual health care decision is yours. And I believe in that. And I don't believe that companies should be infringing on people's civil liberties in this manner. So I hope everyone have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful evening. And if you didn't, I know that the State of the Union is going on, but I wanted to just drop this video, talk about cackling Kamala and how she just thinking black people are just so dumb. She give us the extra dummies version of stuff, but she gives everybody the extra dummies of versions of stuff. So I'm kind of thinking that this is not a version. This is just the way she speaks. And God help us. We got a senile president and a Valley Girl vice president. Whew. Fun times to be in America. The world is going to shit, everybody. Keep your prayers up. Trust in God. I mean, and here's the thing. Turn the stuff off too. sometimes the watching this stuff unfold can be so overwhelming. You just got to turn it off. Like last weekend, I actually did that. You know, I didn't engage on social media as much. I went up north, I hung out, I chilled out, and I just relaxed. I don't even think I tuned into social media at all too much. I think I did kind of check, but that's it. But turn it off sometimes, because sometimes it can be so irritating to just watch this stupid shit play out that you're just like, oh my God, like, I need a bottle of wine. So have a good evening, everyone. And I would love comments. If you do catch the State of the Union, just let me know what you think. I'm going to catch it, and maybe I'll do a video tomorrow, Friday, just kind of addressing some of the points. I don't really expect too much of it. I think it's going to be a bunch of Democratic fluff. Biden's going to exaggerate what he's done. He's going to try to say that Americans are better off than we were before. And I'm going to be like, no, we're not. I'm struggling. Like, seriously, though, I hate the fact that everything is going up so high. And if you have a family, this stuff is killer. So have a good evening, everybody. Stay blessed, stay close to God, and check out when you can. Bye.